The remark left his mouth before his mind could catch it. A soft, careless breath shaped into words meant for no one. He had been watching the vaulted ceiling, not the procession. Silver arches rose like frozen waves above the court floor. Light drifted through crystal panels and fractured into halos. The human envoy stood among towering alien nobles in silence. And in that hush his voice betrayed him. "She is beautiful," he murmured with no weight behind it. Not praise, not intent, just a thought-given sound. A reflex born of human habit and quiet awe. He expected nothing more than the echo of stone. Instead the air changed as if inhaled by something vast. The temperature shifted a fraction colder, then warmer again. The court seemed to lean toward him. He felt her before he saw her presence like gravity. A pressure at his back steady and absolute. Boots did not sound against the polished floor. No rustle of fabric, no breath brushed his ear. Yet every instinct he had began to shout. The kind of warning no training ever dulled. Slowly he turned, already knowing the truth. She stood so close the edge of her armor caught the light. Silver chased with living patterns that pulsed like veins. Her skin carried a pale luminosity, not reflection but source. Braided white hair framed a face carved in serene dominance. Eyes the color of frozen oceans fixed on him unblinking. A crown of filigreed metal rested against her brow. The Queen of Virex had heard everything. The hall had fallen into complete stillness. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds held their breath. This was the moment treaties cracked or civilizations ended. The human envoy felt very small inside his formal coat. He forced his spine straight though his pulse raced. Protocol screamed at him to kneel to recite apology codes. But shock held him frozen between choices. Her gaze did not burn with anger as he expected. It weighed, instead measured and disturbingly curious. He could not read alien expressions, yet something stirred there. Interest perhaps, or calculation sharpened by amusement. She tilted her head a fraction, studying him as one might art. The silence stretched thin enough to cut skin. And then she spoke. "You are unguarded for one who walks among crowns." Her voice was low, carrying layered harmonics. It seemed to resonate through bone more than air. The translator implant lagged a heartbeat behind her tone. Each word landed with deliberate precision. "You speak thoughts aloud without fear. Is that a human failing or strength?" Heat rushed to his face, though he kept his eyes level. He chose honesty because lies felt heavier than truth here. "It is a habit, Your Majesty," he said carefully. "On my world beauty is often acknowledged without purpose. Sometimes without wisdom," he added before stopping himself. Another mistake perhaps, but too late to retrieve. The court murmured like distant surf. The queen did not rebuke him. Instead she stepped past, so close he smelled frost and metal. She moved with a predator's grace yet unhurried, circling him as if he were the center of the hall. "Beauty," she repeated, tasting the word through human sound. "Your kind uses it freely, yet it costs you nothing. On Virex such words have weight." He swallowed, tracking her with peripheral vision only. Turning fully felt like surrendering ground. He wondered how many before him had stood here and failed. How many civilizations were reduced by less than a sentence. Still he felt something unexpected rising beneath fear. A stubborn human instinct to stand and be seen. To be honest even when fragile. "If the word offended, I offer my regret," he said. "Not because it was untrue but because it was careless. I did not mean to diminish your station or power." The translator pulsed warm against his spine. Every noble watched, waiting for the blade to fall. Waiting for her to decide his worth. Or his end. She stopped in front of him again. Close enough that their eyes met fully. In hers he saw ancient storms and long memory. She studied his face not as ruler to subject, but as one sentient weighing another. "Careless," she echoed softly. Yet sincerity rings louder than caution. A ripple passed through the court at that. The queen straightened, drawing herself to full height. "You will walk with me, human," she declared. "This audience will pause until my return." Gasps rippled sharper, now edged with disbelief. No one walked uninvited beside the queen, especially not one so newly arrived. Before he could respond, her hand closed around his wrist. Not forceful, yet impossible to resist. Energy flickered across her gauntlet, recognizing contact. She turned, already guiding him toward a side passage. His heart hammered as doors parted silently ahead. The court vanished behind them, swallowed by light. And his fate followed close behind. The corridor narrowed as they moved away from the court. Walls of pale alloy curved inward, carrying a faint inner glow. His boots echoed, now the sound finally allowed to exist. Her grip never loosened, yet never tightened either. He measured his breath, forcing calm into each step. Fear followed him like a shadow, but curiosity walked beside it. This path was chosen the moment his words escaped him. They passed sentries who did not look at him at all. Each bowed their heads to the queen with absolute precision. Their armor hummed softly, reacting to her proximity. He realized then how completely this world bent around her will. Not through cruelty, but through gravity of presence. It reminded him of old human leaders carved into stone. Authority shaped by certainty rather than noise. At last she stopped before a sealed archway. The metal surface rippled and parted without command. Inside waited a chamber, smaller, warmer, almost intimate. Light here came from no visible source, only soft diffusion. She released his wrist at last, and turned to face him fully. For the first time since the court, he could breathe deeply. Silence settled again, but it felt different now. "You are unsettled," she observed, not unkindly. Her eyes traced him with careful attention. Not as prey, not as subject, but as anomaly. He nodded once, choosing restraint over explanation. "I am aware that words end lives here," he replied. "And that mine were spoken without armor. Still they were honest." "Honesty is rare," she said, moving closer. "So rare it is often mistaken for weakness. On Virex, weakness is removed quickly." She paused, letting that truth settle between them. "Yet you stand unbroken even now. Your pulse races, but your eyes do not flee. That is not weakness." He felt heat rise again, but kept his stance firm. "Humans adapt," he said quietly. "We speak before we think, and then learn to stand by it. Sometimes it costs us dearly, sometimes it saves us." She considered this with a slight tilt of her head. "Your species fascinates the council," she admitted. "Too fragile, yet too persistent." She turned and gestured toward a low seat grown from the wall. "Sit," she instructed, and waited until he did. Only then did she lower herself opposite him. No throne, no elevation, just equal distance. The gesture unsettled him more than intimidation. Power unannounced was harder to prepare against. He folded his hands to still their tremor. "You were sent as observer," she said. "Yet you speak like one unburdened by fear of consequence." He met her gaze fully now. "I was sent because I am expendable," he answered. "If I fail, the loss is acceptable to my people. If I succeed, perhaps understanding begins." She watched him closely, as if measuring resonance. "Expendable," she repeated softly. "Humans send their expendable ones into fire. And yet they continue to arrive." She leaned back, silver braids shifting like woven light. "Your kind does not conserve itself. That is either foolish or profound. I have not yet decided which." He allowed himself a faint breath of humor. "We argue about that ourselves," he said. The corner of her mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. A near smile, and the room seemed brighter for it. "Then tell me," she said. "Why did you speak of beauty when silence would protect you? What compelled the risk?" He did not answer immediately. Images of home surfaced, unbidden, oceans, skies, faces long gone. "Because wonder is difficult to contain," he said at last. "And because beauty reminds us that power does not erase grace. We name it to remember ourselves, even when we should stay quiet, especially then. The queen studied him for a long moment. In that gaze he felt centuries pass like slow tides. You do not kneel, she noted. You do not avert your eyes. Yet you do not challenge me. This balance intrigues me, human. On my world, he said carefully, we learned that survival sometimes depends on standing straight. Not to defy, but to endure. She rose smoothly and began to pace the chamber. The council believes humans will fracture under galactic weight, that you will bend until you break. I am no longer convinced. She stopped before him again. You will remain on Virex, she declared. Not as prisoner, not as guest, but as witness. You will see our systems, our conflicts, our truths, and you will speak of them without armor. He felt the magnitude of that decree settle into his bones. If my words displease you again, he asked. Then we will see what follows, she said calmly. Consequences shape meaning. She turned toward the archway once more. Prepare yourself, human envoy. Carelessness opened this door. What you choose now will decide how far it leads. The chamber doors sealed behind her departure. He remained seated longer than necessary, listening to the hum. Only when the sound faded did he allow tension to leave his shoulders. The air here felt different, charged yet breathable. Witness, she had called him, not guest, not prisoner. A role without script or protection. He rose slowly, testing the reality of it. Time passed without measure until the archway opened again. This time attendants entered bearing layered garments. Their movements were careful, respectful, almost reverent. They did not meet his eyes but treated him with precision. Clothing woven with adaptive fibers rested across their arms. Symbols shimmered briefly before settling into neutral tones. An invitation disguised as preparation. You will be presented to the inner spiral, one said softly. The words carried weight beyond translation. He accepted the garments, knowing refusal would echo loudly. As they dressed him, sensors threaded along seams. The fabric adjusted to his body warmth and pulse. Armor without plates, protection without threat. Virex understood symbolism well. He was guided through corridors unseen by the public court. Here architecture shifted from grandeur to purpose. Systems pulsed behind translucent walls. Energy flowed like blood through a living organism. This was the heart of the empire, not its mask. He felt awe sharpen into respect. Human engineering suddenly felt young. They arrived at a balcony overlooking a vast chamber. Below floated platforms arranged in spiraling tiers. Figures occupied each station, varied in form and scale. This was the inner spiral, the decision engine of Virex. He understood now why his presence mattered. To speak here was to ripple history. The queen stood at the center waiting. She did not turn when he arrived. Instead she raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. The spiral quieted attention, focusing inward. She spoke without amplification, yet every ear heard. The human will speak, she announced. Not as advocate, not as plea, but as reflection. He felt hundreds of minds settle upon him. Curiosity sharpened by scrutiny. He stepped forward onto the platform offered. Gravity adjusted seamlessly, meeting his weight. He swallowed, then began. Not with defense but with story. He spoke of Earth skies fractured by pollution and hope. Of wars fought and regrets learned too late. Of beauty named even in ruins. Because naming it kept it alive. His voice steadied as truth carried him. He did not argue superiority. He offered perspective. The spiral listened more intently than any human council ever had. Questions came not as interruptions but invitations. He answered with honesty even when it painted flaws. Especially then. The queen watched without expression. Yet something in her posture eased. As if certainty found footing. When it ended there was no applause. Only a long, thoughtful quiet. Then the queen spoke again. This witness has shown courage without conquest, truth without shield. Let that be recorded. The spiral shifted, consensus forming like slow crystallization. A decision not yet final but redirected. The queen turned to him at last. You have altered trajectory, she said. Carelessness began this. Intention carried it forward. He felt exhaustion crash through him. Yet beneath it a quiet pride stirred. Not for himself but for what he represented. She extended her hand, not command but offer. Walk with me, she said. There is more you must see. As they departed together, he understood the weight of being human here. Not conqueror, not curiosity, but constant reminder that fragility and persistence could coexist without contradiction, and that sometimes a careless truth could open doors no weapon ever would. The walk beside her felt unreal as corridors unfolded ahead. Lights responded to her presence, dimming then brightening. No guards flanked them now, no witnesses hovered close. The absence of ceremony carried its own meaning. He sensed that this path was chosen, not displayed. The queen moved with deliberate calm, each step measured. He matched her pace, refusing to lag. They entered a chamber, open to the void itself. A vast transparent wall revealed stars drifting like slow embers. Virex ships moved along distant vectors, silent and immense. Here the hum of power was deeper, almost comforting. She stopped near the edge, hands clasped behind her back. This is where I think, she said without turning. Where rulers must face scale. You changed the spiral, she continued. Not through argument but exposure. They saw themselves reflected in your fragility. That unsettles those who believe strength must be armored. He absorbed this, unsure whether it was praise or warning. On earth, he replied softly, we learned that reflection is often painful. She turned then, studying his face again. You do not seek advantage, yet advantage follows you. That is dangerous, she said plainly. Others will attempt to use you. Some will attempt to remove you. This empire is old, not gentle. Witnesses attract gravity. He nodded, understanding settling heavy. I did not come to be safe, he answered. Only to be honest. If that invites risk, then it is familiar territory. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You speak as if survival is secondary. To humans, survival is often collective, he said. She considered that in silence. Then she gestured and the stars shifted. Data overlays bloomed, showing conflicts, trade routes, fractures. This is what you have entered, she said. An empire balanced by fear of itself. Unity maintained through controlled distance. Your presence disrupts that equilibrium. He studied the projections, mind racing. I do not command armies, he said. I hold no authority here. True, she replied, yet narratives command more than fleets. Already some spiral members question isolation doctrine. Others fear contagion of empathy. Both reactions destabilize control. A tremor rippled through the chamber. Not physical but systemic. Alerts flashed briefly then vanished. She did not react outwardly. There it is, she murmured. The first response. He felt cold settle along his spine. What response, he asked. A test, she said. Of you and of me. She faced him fully now. I will not shield you from it. If you endure, you become precedent. If you fail, you become warning. The chamber doors opened abruptly. An aide entered, urgency breaking protocol. Queen consort vessels have altered formation. They request audience immediately. Her jaw tightened for the first time. So soon, she whispered. To him she said, walk beside me and speak only truth. They moved quickly through converging halls. He felt eyes tracking him unseen. Whispers traveled faster than bodies. By the time they reached the receiving hall, delegates already waited, armored and severe. The air vibrated with restrained hostility. The lead envoy spoke first, voice edged with disdain. This human compromises equilibrium. He weakens the spiral through sentiment. We demand his removal. Gasps echoed sharp and brief. The queen did not respond immediately. She looked at the human instead. Speak, she said simply. The hall seemed to constrict around him. He felt fear surge, then steady. If my presence weakens you, he said, then your strength was already brittle. Empires endure not by silence but by adaptation. Murmurs rose, angered yet uncertain. He continued before courage could fade. I do not ask you to change, only to observe yourselves honestly. If that observation frightens you, then fear already governs you. The envoy bristled, stepping forward. You accuse us of cowardice. The queen raised a hand, stopping him. She studied the human one last time. Then she turned to the assembly. He speaks as witness, not threat. She stepped forward, voice carrying iron. Virex will not silence reflection. We will confront discomfort and survive it. Any who cannot adapt will fracture. And that fracture will reveal truth. The decision landed like a blade. The delegates withdrew, rigid and furious. The hall emptied, leaving them alone again. The queen exhaled slowly, a rare human gesture. You have crossed a threshold, she said. There is no return now. He met her gaze, unwavering. I am still here, he replied. She nodded, once, acceptance settling. Then you will stand with me when consequences arrive. Because they will. The stars beyond the glass seemed closer now. As if listening. As if waiting. History had leaned forward. The consequences arrived without drama, yet carried immense weight. They came as shifts in patrol routes and hesitations in command. As questions asked too openly and answers no longer rehearsed. He felt it in the way corridors no longer diverted him. In how eyes lingered, not with suspicion but recalibration. The empire had inhaled and not yet decided how to exhale. Change had begun its quiet work. He stood beside her again before the great void wall. Stars burned, patient and indifferent beyond transparent alloy. The queen's posture held strain, now visible only to him. Not weakness but effort, the cost of steering momentum. You will be remembered, she said without turning. Not for what you demanded, but for what you refused to hide. He absorbed that in silence, feeling the truth of it. I did not come to be remembered, he replied. Only to see if honesty could survive here. She inclined her head slightly. It has, she said. Now it must be protected. Protection came not as guards but as purpose. She assigned him to no office, gave him no seal. Instead she opened doors to those who questioned quietly. Scientists, philosophers, commanders, uneasy with certainty. He spoke with them all, never persuading, only reflecting. Some recoiled, some leaned closer. But none forgot the mirror. Resistance hardened elsewhere as expected. Factions formed, language sharpened, motives simplified. He became symbol more than man in their rhetoric. Danger grew like pressure behind walls. The queen knew this and did not retreat. Empires that survived, she said, did not flinch from tension. They learned to shape it. The attempt came without warning. A failure in lighting a pause too long in a passage. He felt it before he understood it. The queen moved faster than thought, pulling him aside. Energy flared, alarms died mid-note. When it ended, the corridor stood empty again. Only silence testified to intent. He stared at the place it might have ended. Fear trembled, then passed, replaced by clarity. So this is the cost, he said. She studied him, searching for fracture. And finding resolve instead. Yes, she answered simply. And now it is shared. From that moment the court no longer pretended. Debate turned open, fractures named rather than hidden. Some worlds withdrew, others leaned inward. Virex did not collapse. It bent, adjusted, learned. Pain marked the process but growth followed. He was no longer alone in witness. Others began to speak without armor. naming beauty in unlikely places, naming failure without shame. Human habits spread not as doctrine, but as permission to be unguarded and endure. When his departure finally came, it was not exile, nor triumph, nor closing of doors. The queen walked him to the threshold herself. "You will carry this with you," she said, "and it will change your people too." Witness always does. He looked back once at the vast living empire, at a queen who chose reflection over silence. "I spoke without thinking," he said softly. She met his eyes, steady and vast, and changed everything. She replied,